Imagine this, a weekend surrounded by nature's beauty in the heart of the English woodlands. A shimmering lake at sunset, movie night under the stars, with turmeric and black pepper popcorn in hand. World-renowned health advocate Barbara O'Neill live, empowering you to take back control of your health. Plus a powerhouse lineup of expert speakers, wellness workshops, and soul-nourishing experiences. This isn't just a festival, it's a movement, and you don't want to miss out. The Wellness Way Festival, where nature, knowledge, and community collide. Save the date, August the 8th to the 10th, 2025. Tickets are limited, so sign up to my newsletter on phillyjlay.com so you can be the first to know all the updates. Come and join the wellness revolution, because as you know, the doctor of your future is you.
Don't feed dogs on any cooked bones. Benefits: bugs, balance and bones. You are twice as likely to get infection from your children at kindergarten than you are from feeding your dogs raw food.
As you know, dog is God spelt backwards, and my bears are the loves of my life. I am absolutely thrilled to invite Nick Thompson on the show.
Am I going to be a conventional vet who dabbles in homeopathy, or am I going to nail my colours to the mast? And so I thought, right, that's it. I'm going to commit to being a holistic vet. There's a tenet of homeopathy which says, avoid and remove obstacles to cure. And it suddenly struck me, literally, road to Damascus, obstacles to cure is what we're feeding them. You know, you talk to your grandmother, she'll say, you are what you eat. And yet we were feeding these dogs on this ultra-processed food. That was before ultra-processed food was even a phrase.
Yeah.
You know, raw, okay? But it's well-sourced, and they haven't had a day's illness.
Welcome to The Wellness Way with me, Philly J. Lay, a layperson's guide to your natural health systems, your very own NHS.
Hello, lovely people, and welcome to another episode of The Wellness Way. And I've got a great big smile on my face today because this is a subject that I could talk about forever. And that's my fur babies, my dogs. Now, we're going to talk about other pets as well. But as you know, dog is God spelt backwards. And my bears are the loves of my life. They are my children as well as my daughters. So I am absolutely thrilled to invite Nick Thompson on the show, the holistic vet in a very toxic world. And we're going to talk about that. Nick, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Philly, it's like coming home. It really is lovely to be here. We've been upstairs for half an hour drinking exquisite foraged tea, putting the world to rights, and just met Sean, your audio and sound guy, and
you met Herbie, my puppy.
I met Herbie, the puppy who's not quite a puppy, but he looks like a puppy. I always say he's like a dog, only smaller. Okay, he's great, and
he's never seen a vet before. 14 months old, and you are the first vet he's seen, and we're going to cover that.
Okay, let's do that. Why does it on podcasts everybody says I'm really excited? Have you noticed? Everybody always at the beginning of a
Joe
podcast
Rogan doesn't.
says
Well,
no,
actually,
but Joe is a maestro at this stuff.
But you know what? I don't invite people on that I'm not excited to meet.
Okay.
I do this because I love getting this information out.
For sure.
It's exciting.
It's just an excuse to have a really good chat, isn't it? To go places that you wouldn't otherwise. You know, in order to have this conversation, we'd have to have a dinner party and, you know, go off into a little corner and go, do you really think about, you know, chemtrails, about vaccination, all these things? It would be a difficult conversation just to have, you know, walking down the high street, possibly.
And a difficult conversation to have at any kind of normal dinner or lunch,
Oh,
because
yes.
a lot of people think you're mad.
Yes.
And so
yes.
this podcast is for wider awake people like you. So, Nick, I'm going to dive straight in. Tell us a little bit about yourself. I know that you are an amazing holistic vet, as I said, in a toxic world, which is not an easy task to do. But you are also a huge advocate for raw food diet for dogs. Just for dogs or for all animals?
I started my career, so I can kind of answer those two in one go, if you like. I started my career wanting to be James Herriot, actually. And for younger people, that is a vet who wrote books in the 50s and 60s, and they televised it, and the books became very popular, which meant that I had to get incredibly good grades to get into vet college, because it was suddenly very popular. You weren't just a glorified farmer. You were, this clever and, able and...
Like James Herriot.
Like James Herriot. So let's just assume, I would think most of your audience know who James Herriot is. So that's who I wanted to be initially, okay? And I did that. I my first job was in Yorkshire, and I was I had two jobs in Yorkshire. One was in just near Bridlington, and then another one in Helmsley. And so I was actually delivering calves for farmers who'd had Alf White, who was based in Thirsk, just down the road. I was delivering calves for farmers who'd had Alf White out to the farm. So that's my connection. Direct connection, indirect direct connection with Alf White. And so what I was saying was I was really inspired by that, to be out of doors, to be working with animals, to be meeting some lovely people. That was incredibly inspiring to me. My father was a doctor, a GP, and my mother was a nurse. So there was a lot of medical background. And I thought, I don't want to be a doctor. I faint at the sight of human blood. I kid you not.
Wow, that's a disadvantage for a doctor.
A little bit of a disadvantage. So I thought, veterinary medicine, I'll be out of doors. It's a physical job. It's a very natural kind of job. And so that's why I went into veterinary medicine. I was at Edinburgh for 6 years, came out with 2 degrees, and started in Yorkshire. I then worked in normal practice for 3 years, and then decided, I started studying homeopathy at that stage, and I just thought, am I going to be a conventional vet who dabbles in homeopathy, or am I going to nail my colours to the mast? I'd just done a course called the Landmark Forum, which is all about, the strapline is an inquiry into what it is to be human. And commitment was an important part of that, to decide who you are, where you're going, and commit to that path. And so I thought, right, that's it. I'm going to commit to being a holistic vet. And so started with homeopathy, and then started investigating acupuncture, learned acupuncture, and then raw food came along in the mid-90s, which is really, really interesting. And then in the 2000s, learnt veterinary herbs. But and I've been doing those things ever since. But the raw food thing, which started as just a whisper in the mid-90s, a friend came back from Australia and talked about an amazing book by a guy called Ian Billinghurst called The Barf Diet. And I thought, oh, what a load of nonsense. What's wrong with kibble? Because that's how I was trained. That's how I was trained. Forgive me. And he
does.
And
he knows you were lied to.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And so what happened was I was studying homeopathy, and as some of your guys might know, there's a tenet of homeopathy which says avoid and remove obstacles to cure. And it suddenly struck me, literally, road to Damascus, one of the biggest road obstacles to cure is what we're feeding them. You know, you talk to your grandmother, she'll say, you are what you eat. And yet we were feeding these dogs on this ultra-processed food. That was before ultra-processed food was even a phrase, you know. But it suddenly dawned on me, and I thought, right, this is it. Raw food, makes so much sense. Let's do it. You know, you've got to think, what have dogs been eating for the last 45 million years? They have not been eating.
They haven't been cooking their food or having processed.
They haven't been eating kibble. They haven't been eating cans. They haven't been eating, you know, pouches, all this stuff. And so I found it very easy because it's so obvious that if you feed a dog or a cat or a human on, you know, ultra-processed food for any length of time, i.e. more than one meal possibly, you're going to get into real trouble. You know, you're going to get into real trouble because the body is just is at one very simple level, it's a machine. And if the building blocks that you put in are imperfect, are not entirely recognized by the factory that is the metabolism, you're going to break that metabolism. And what do we see in canine medicine, in human medicine? There's just so much, you know, autoimmune disease, inflammatory disease, degenerative disease, arthritis. All these things are considered normal, but if we can cleanse and improve the diet, then all those diseases can be healed without even having to have recourse to pharmaceutical medicine.
Which would be fantastic.
Which has to be a good thing.
I mean, I'm very, very late to the raw diet as a fur mother.
Every day is a school day. That's absolutely fine. You've had your road to Damascus revelation.
Yeah,
I presume.
Yes, and I knew when I had my first dog, Mr. Rupert Bear, who'd be 14 now.
Okay.
So my childhood dogs, Mum used to kind of give them the leftover from the meals, which was kind of vegetables and meat and the fat that I left, although my dad would eat that, and a tin.
Yeah.
But they never had kibble. I never saw one of our dogs have kibbles. But when I got Mr. Rupert Bear, I kind of thought, right, I don't want that shit in a tin and the pouches. And I just open them and they smell rank.
Yeah.
You know, that is not food. So I discovered a company called Button Up Box, who I love. And I think they do a very good cooked food.
Yep.
I was very naive at that time and I thought we had global warming. So I asked them if they could do a vegetarian dog food.
Or a vegan. I think do a vegan? Yeah.
And then I discovered something just before Mr. Bear passed, actually, on the raw food diet. And I think it might have been a podcast with you. I can't remember. So this is kind of about 2.5 years ago, I started hearing about it. And I thought, hang on. So Evie Bear, Rupert was never particularly a one for it. But Evie, when she was a puppy, she could chase a pigeon, catch it, devour it in minutes, and love it. And then I heard about other people that were giving their animals, their dogs, raw chicken wings and rabbit ears and things like that. And I'm thinking, aren't they going to get poisoned? Because we've been taught to eat raw chicken is poisonous. Now, that is because the state of our farming industry. It's not to do with the actual meat.
Totally correct. Yes. If, you know, it's I won't go into its infinite detail, but basically, modern agriculture is predicated on the quantity of food it produces, and so we produce loads of grain, and it's very poor quality. We produce loads of meat, and it's not great quality, and we rely in the UK and in the States even more on these concentrated animal feed operations, okay? If you like battery. If you think of battery chickens, that's a concentrated animal feed operation whereby you are trying to produce as much quantity of material after only 8-9 weeks. These birds the Kentucky Fried Chicken bird
my God.
is very, very
just
young.
got to tap.
I know, it's horrendous, but it speaks volumes. And so there you go. That's modern agriculture produces this less than perfect, in a really big way, a less than perfect meat, which does provide protein and fat and what have you, but you can create food which is not that great out of that.
So does it worry you? So I never buy raw chicken for my bears. I tend to go with lamb because lamb is predominantly, out on the grass.
It is extensively raised.
Yeah. I tend to go for venison because, it comes in from the woods. I never touch chicken for them. I never touch salmon because if it's salmon, it's going to be farmed salmon, which means it's highly injected and processed and sprayed for mites on a almost daily basis, isn't it? It's really...
And colorants and all that stuff. And you're damaging the lochs of Scotland or Norway or wherever it might be. Yeah, totally agree.
Do you worry about feeding a raw diet with the quality of the meat available in the world now?
I think it's really important, if you're choosing a raw diet, to find meat suppliers or complete food suppliers who go above and beyond good enough. Okay. I work with a number of companies, and over the years I've worked with most of the primary companies who are in the UK, and I work with them because they are conscious of poor quality material, and they want to feed really, really good quality material. So therefore, to cut a long story short, if you source chicken wisely that is not battery and is as extensively ranged as possible, you can give raw chicken product to dogs. Our dogs get, when they come in from a walk in the morning, they all get a chicken wing, and they absolutely expect it. And
they have the bones in that chicken wing.
They absolutely do.
Because they love that, and it's really good for them.
And it's really fantastic to see, because Jet, for example, he's our new puppy. He's a puppy up here. He's a lurcher.
Not like my puppy.
No, not like your puppy. He will start chewing here, and he'll tip his head over here, chonk, 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 and then he'll flip it over to the other side and then go chew, 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 and then again flip it over to here until he's reduced it down to the size, because you can actually you can feel the size of this stuff. You learn it very, very young as a puppy, and he then knows it's fine, and he just will eat it, and it takes him about 25 seconds.
Oh my God, that quick. I thought you were going to say 25 minutes.
Nope, it takes him, and the girls, they are Whippet Italian Greyhounds, i.e. a mongrel. But I won't say that because my wife, will be very offended. But they're crosses, they're beautiful, lovely. They will do the same. They will take a little longer, so they'll take maybe 45 seconds to eat an entire chicken wing. That's the routine. I'll take them out for their walk in the morning before the sun is up, and then they will come back and they'll have their chicken wing in front of the fire, and they're happy as Larry. Raw, okay? But it's well sourced, and they haven't had a day's illness. Bluebell is 5 years old. Mouse is 3 years old. Jet is 1 year old. So between them, that's 9 dog years. They have never been to the vet for an infection, for a gut issue, for any problem whatsoever.
Wow.
Yeah. And so, actually, Bluebell got a grass seed in her ear. She wouldn't let me...
Yeah, grass seed is... I remember Evie getting one in between her toes.
Yeah, and they can burrow, and so they're a bit of a nightmare. And so so she had to go for that, but that was just a 5-second pull it out
tweezer.
because she wouldn't let me anywhere near it. so they had
Your
to
dad's a vet.
yeah, so they knocked her out, pulled it out, and then she was fine. She was good. But food-wise, zero problem. People talk to me about issues in raw food, but actually with raw food, you can actually boil it down to 4 major criticisms. And this comes from the World Small Animal Veterinary Association. In 2012, they came out with their criticisms of raw. Okay, they happen to be sponsored by Royal Canin and Hills and Purina, Nestle, yeah?
Okay.
Royal Canin, Mars, and Hills is Procter and Gamble. Okay.
Okay, so just follow them.
All these companies who are desperately worried about feeding human beings healthy food. So Mars, yeah.
Yep.
Nestle, who make Kit Kat, among other ultra processed foods, and Procter and Gamble, who came out with Crisco in 1911, and so that's the whole. That's the whole omega-6 and polyunsaturated, ultra damaging oil conversation.
Yep.
So those are the 3, the big...
Usual suspects.
The usual suspects. Okay, so...
so they were the people that were going, don't eat the raw. It's not good for you.
They have, I believe, they would probably deny it. I believe that they have, as raw became more popular, they have propagandized that raw is very dangerous. So the World Small Animal Association, WSAVA, World Small Animal Veterinary Association, that in 2012 said we have 4 criticisms of raw food, and they are: there are no demonstrable benefits, there are bugs in the raw food, that raw foods are not balanced, and bones damage dog. Okay, so you can take that down to there are benefits, bugs, balance, and bones. And I'd be really happy to just go through those briefly. I do a 2-hour lecture on these.
Yeah, I would like you to go through that, because bones is something that I was going to ask you a question on anyway. So.
These are the 4 questions that everybody, from the most the most academic of nutritionists to Mrs. Jones or Mr. Smith on the street, they will all ask questions in those 4 areas. So let's just go through them briefly.
Yeah.
So the WSAVA, and they've updated their guidelines, but still they're wrong. There are dozens and dozens and dozens of papers demonstrating the benefits of raw food. And what's really interesting, Philly, is that the kibble companies have not been able to produce one study demonstrating that kibble is healthier than raw food, raw or fresh food. We call fresh food is raw food that's been perhaps lightly cooked. Yeah? So butternut or different dog, they are lightly cooked offerings for dogs, because there are some people who can't go down the raw
I struggle because I've been vegetarian since on and off, well, mainly on since 1980. But that was just I didn't like meat. My mum, when I was 6 years old, she found my pet pig on the sofa watching Blue Peter, and she said, "If you do that again, Snow is going to the slaughterhouse."
I think I've heard you say that story,
and I thought she was joking. So so for me, it's just a personal choice.
Sure.
So I really struggled with serving raw food for many years, and I don't enjoy it now. But I think my dog's health is more important.
Species appropriate food is really important. I've got lots of vegan clients who totally get that nutrition is massive in terms of health, and they feed raw food to their dogs, and I really encourage that. That's a really, really good idea. So
talk us through these 4.
So going back to the 4. So benefits. Are there any benefits? Yes, there are. And now we have Google and we have Grok, and it's very easy to find study after study after study. For example, every year I go to the Helsinki to the university there, where they have there's a department called Dog Risk, and they are doing studies on the benefits of raw food versus kibble. Okay, so these guys are churning out papers. So if anybody wants to look, you just look at Dog Risk Helsinki benefits of raw, and you will see some papers. I've got some on my laptop here, but I'm not going to bore.
We'll put that in the show notes.
Fabulous.
So that people
I'll give you those. Yeah. So these are some of the papers. So basically, it's the on the scorecard, raw food has got dozens and dozens and dozens of papers saying that raw food is better than kibble, and the kibble manufacturers have zero papers on the scorecard saying that they are better than raw.
Yeah.
Okay, so benefits. Okay, so that's number one, benefits. Yep. So bugs. This is the one that most people are terrified of. They've heard stories of salmonella and E. coli or worms or something like this. And the bottom line, if we just want to keep it simple, is that if dogs, because there are millions of dogs having raw food now, it's because it's such a growth industry. If raw food was inherently dangerous to dogs, then there would be an epidemic of dogs going into vets having problems, and vets would be seeing, oh, you've just started on raw food and now your dog is terribly ill, and then a week later, oh, you just started on raw food and your dog is terribly ill. This is not happening. And you can guarantee that if there was even the smallest wave of sick dogs in Kensington,
it would be all over the Daily Mail.
Exactly. It would be on the front page of the Daily Mail.
Yeah.
Because it makes great copy. Yeah. It's dogs and it's sickness and it's
and then they'd be banging the climate change drum,
totally
going, you can't feed your dog meat.
Totally. So what I'm saying in a very roundabout way is that we are feeding millions of dogs in the UK every single day, from the lowest quality to the highest quality of raw food, and we are not seeing any significant numbers of infections at all. It's really funny. There was a meme where there were three pictures, and this young 20-something girl took her dog and said, "Oh, my dog's got diarrhea," and the vet is there in the picture saying, "Oh, that'll be the raw food." And then in the next one, it's, "Oh, my dog is a bit lame," and the vet is going, "Oh, that'll be the raw food." And then in the third one, she says, "Oh, my boyfriend's left me," and the vet is going, "That'll be the raw food." It's always blamed on the raw food, whatever it might be, even though the vet may have seen 6 cases of that this month who eat kibble. It's totally illogical. Totally illogical. So the bugs thing, loads of dogs are getting fed raw, and the number of cases are vanishingly small, and it's very difficult to actually to say the bug that your dog has got has definitely come from raw food. There's a dog risk paper, came out in 2019, written by Antorinimi, and she looked at 45,000 households, some with multiple dogs. So actually this is like something like 90,000 dogs over many years, and said how many cases of infection to owners from feeding raw food to the dogs. And they found that there were 3 possible. So you've got 90,000 cases being examined,
really small.
And there were 3 cases. And what was really interesting in this paper, and you can find it online, is that they found that you are twice as likely to get infection from your children at kindergarten than you are from feeding your dogs raw food. So beware, kindergarten.
I'm going to come back to bugs.
Yep.
But I want to finish this section first, and then we'll go back to bugs.
I could talk about this stuff all day.
I
So
know. I love it.
you'll have to move me on. So benefits, loads. Bugs just
Bollocks.
don't seem to cause a problem. Don't seem to cause a problem at all. So balance. So this is a big one. So the nutritionists will say that every meal has to be balanced. And the question I'm going to ask you, Philly, is when was the last time you ate a balanced meal?
I have a balanced meal every day.
No, you have a balanced diet over a week or two. Yeah, because you may take a little too much calcium on a Monday, and a little too much zinc on a Tuesday, a little too much fat
True,
on a Wednesday, a little too much selenium on a Thursday. But your body, in its infinite wisdom, balances those out such that,
Yep.
And if you did happen every 10 years or so to have a balanced meal, you wouldn't know because it looks exactly like an unbalanced meal.
It's true.
But most humans eat an unbalanced meals, and yet most of us, with a little bit of work, do very well. Okay? If you eat bad food, you will get ill.
Yeah.
If you eat great food and you have plenty of variety, you will be fine. So the whole idea
so
that
variety
is
that
key.
What the
Totally.
nutritionists are going on about?
Totally key. No, the raw fooders, they're talking about variety, okay? Because if you feed variety, so you get your macronutrients about right, and you have a variety of proteins, and you have a variety of greens, and a variety of nuts and herbs and seeds and what have you, the body, as it has for 45 million years, will do the rest, yeah? Nutrition only became a thing in kind of the 1910s, 1920s. What were dogs and humans doing for, humans have been around arguably 3 million years, dogs arguably 45 million years, and yet we're still here.
And yet
Food is not complex.
Some people would argue that we now have, or we had, but that is reversing quite fast, a longer lifespan.
Yeah.
We don't really know. We can kind of have a rough idea from walking around a graveyard how old people lived till, 100 to a couple of hundred years ago. And we will see children, a grave of a baby, quite regularly.
Yes, very much so.
But you have to look at the living conditions as well of people.
Yes,
there.
slums.
The slums, and
the dirt.
kind of, and going right back to kind of the Elizabethan times, where you would have a room with 16 children, mum and dad, and a load of bloody rats in the rafters.
Yeah. And slats in the floorboards so that any excrement can just pass down through to the cellar, where somebody even less fortunate than yourself is living. Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And the reason they have 4-poster beds were to keep the rats out as they fell out of the ceiling,
Yes.
So
Yeah.
But people will argue that we then went on and had these incredibly balanced diet, and World War II was most probably the healthiest diet that mankind has ever had.
Yeah.
I would say, in the Western world.
Yes.
Obviously, that doesn't apply if you're Well, I suppose in Japan they had their healthiest diet as well. But now getting that balance in.
Yeah.
What is a balanced diet for a dog? Can you chop it up and go, well, they've had liver one day, turkey that day, beef that day, thing, or do they need vegetables?
So getting back to the balance thing, so the fundamental thing is they don't need every bowl of food to be balanced. Now, if you talk to Purina, or you talk to Hills, or you talk to Royal Canin, they'll say absolutely it has to be balanced. Everybody knows that. But actually, every bowl doesn't need to be balanced. The diet, which is something that happens over a couple of weeks, needs to be balanced. That's the differentiation, okay?
Okay.
Because these food companies, they're producing food out of a factory. They can only produce one formula, whereas in nature you have exposure to variable levels of nutrients, and the body will absorb the nutrients that you need. Obviously, you need enough energy, and you need enough fat, you need enough protein, but the body is very good at, once you get the basics right, at doing putting the icing on the cake with micronutrients, the magnesiums, the seleniums, whatever, of this world. So, and as far as balance is concerned, if you feed a variety. Now, if you feed liver on a Monday, turkey on a Tuesday, and lamb on a Wednesday, you'd probably get away with that. But the easiest way to do it, I find, is that you feed some meat and you feed some veggies. I feed about 85% meat, and that meat would mean I usually start approximately an 80-10-10 balance. 80% muscle meat, 10% bone, and 10% organ meat. And that's mainly liver, kidney, and what have you. So start with a base of about 85%, 80-10-10. Okay? Is that complex?
No,
okay.
That's quite
so
easy.
You've got meaty material. Yeah, it's red, minced, meaty material. On top of that, I will add lightly steamed green veggies. Okay, which can be broccoli, can be green beans, runner beans, can be cavolo nero, cabbage, whatever cabbage is there. It can be nettles, it can be anything you forage, but mainly green vegetable material.
Okay. My Evie Bear loves a carrot.
Okay.
I mean,
carrots are okay, but they soak up a lot of badness if that carrot is grown in a non-organic soil. If it's less than a very clean, say regenerative soil, they're very good at soaking up pesticides and herbicides.
They are. I mean,
and what have you.
Luckily in our house we don't have any chemical food in here. So
But the average carrot.
the average carrot. Okay, so that I didn't realize. But it's not on the Dirty Dozen list. You know the Dirty Dozen list of the 12 foods that suck up the most pesticides. Spinach is up there. Sure. Strawberries, nectarines. Apples are one of the most sprayed plants on the planet.
Yeah.
But
it's not on 12, but maybe it's 13.
Maybe it is 13. Okay, so just be really, really careful.
I think so. And also they're very sugary. Yeah, dogs and humans shouldn't eat a lot of sugar, to be avoided.
Yeah,
sugar
true.
is white death, as we know.
Yeah.
And we can talk about that till the cows come home. But I think green veg, because what we're trying to do is we're trying to feed a dog. I used to do cats, but now because I was so busy, I had to draw a line. So now I just concentrate on dogs. So forgive me, cat lovers. So if we're feeding dogs, they are carnivorous. They can dip down a little bit into omnivory. Yeah, they can eat berries. They can eat vegetable material and what have you, but they're mainly carnivorous. They'll eat, historically they'll eat frogs and lizards and rats and bunnies and deer and basically whatever they can get hold of.
And birds, pigeons.
And birds and pigeons, totally, absolutely. But they'll also eat, ruminant feces, yeah? So this would be deer poo, rabbit poo, sheep poo, and what have you. And I think that's a very good idea. It is probiotic. You may not like it, but as long as that animal has not just been wormed and all this pharmaceutical is coming out of the ruminant, sheep poo, rabbit poo is absolutely fantastic, and I encourage it.
I'm so glad you said that because both of my dogs love a bit of poo. And it worries me. I mean, I live in the middle of nowhere, so the animals, I'm not worried about what they've eaten, but they do like a bit of horse poo. And I obviously don't know if that horse has been to a vet, what diet that horse is on.
It's going to be grain, mainly.
Yeah. And so you don't know how that grain was grown, whether it's GMO, whether it's been sprayed with glyphosate,
Yes, it will be.
And you talked earlier about, chickens and, kind of good food and if it's factory farmed. But, all it has to say to make a free range chicken is the only thing. A little
door in the side of the barn.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The door's open.
I know.
But you can have those chickens packed in there so they can't get out.
Yeah. And
they're being fed shite.
Yeah.
Not healthy shite, but, just crap.
Rubbish food.
Yeah. So this is, kind of a concern for me, but I suppose it's more a concern for us humans because we're also getting hammered on that level.
We are often being fed absolute rubbish. Natasha Campbell McBride says everything in a supermarket is toxic.
Yep.
And if you think of it, she's probably right.
Yep, no.
Yeah.
I have a saying that I have used very often on this show. I mean, it's almost becoming weekly now. And it's if you want to be healthy, you stay out of two places, a supermarket and a doctor's surgery.
Nice.
That's
Nice.
it. And if you're a dog, you stay out of a vet's.
Yes.
Unless it's Nick Thompson. So,
okay,
there's one more.
so that we got onto that from carrots. So I don't tend to feed carrots to dogs, but feeding, one or two good carrots every now and again to your dog is not a biggie. Okay. Concentrate on the good stuff, and if you get it right 80% of the time, you can relax a little bit with that 20%. I would suggest. Okay. Same for people. Yeah.
Okay.
Get it right 80% of the time. So, if we're making up a bowl of food, and I would suggest if people want to start with raw, and I would encourage it massively, the way to start is to talk to a raw food manufacturer, one of the good quality raw food manufacturers. I'm not going to name names because the ones who I don't mention will lynch me, but there are some great manufacturers. And if you go on Google and you just look at the top 10, you're going to get some good manufacturers. Talk to them. Find the people whose quality and ethics you really resonate with. Find the price point that works for you. And, try some food. And if your dog likes the food, great. But the key, remember, is variety. Don't just say, oh, Teddy likes chicken, therefore I'm just going to feed chicken. Their chicken variety for the rest of their time. So you've got to go variety either within one manufacturer or you dot around a few manufacturers. Great. Whatever works. But fundamentally, that's how you start. If you want to DIY, if you want to make the food yourself, you can. So for me, to make it simple, you start with an 80-10-10 base. 80 muscle meat, 10% bone, and 10% organ meat. Okay.
Now I'm going to ask you about organ because the only food I get is from Riverford Farms, so
Yes.
I don't go into a supermarket. And when you get one of their chickens, it comes with the organs inside and the neck.
Yep.
Now, I was cooking the liver for my dogs, and when my children were young, I used to get a chicken once a week and cook it once a week. Now I just do it a couple of times a year, but when they were little, I did serve them meat
for the
every
nutrients.
week.
Very good.
Yes,
agreed.
So I used to take the organ and just flash it in a pan and give it to the dogs.
Yep.
Then somebody told me, and this kind of made sense to me to a degree, the liver is processing the toxins in your body.
Yes.
So I read this article. They're saying if it's processing the toxins, it is toxic.
Yeah.
It's full of the toxins, and therefore it's very dangerous to give liver to a dog more than say once a month.
Yeah.
Tell me what you
Disagree
think.
with that. We do need to come back to our balance. Yeah, we've only got three.
I know.
Three down on four.
Okay,
but we will go there. Okay, good. As long as between us, we will get there. Okay, so liver. So you could argue that don't eat liver because it detoxifies. Therefore, it's going to be toxic. But I think it's more like if it detoxifies, it's arguably the cleanest organ in the body because it actively detoxifies itself, more so than the heart, more so than the kidneys, more so than the brain. So I'm a big fan of liver. I love, for me, I will lightly cook it and eat it because it's so full of iron and zinc and vitamin D. Really important because we're all running around and most dogs are running around without enough vitamin D. And as the last 5 years of COVID have shown us that vitamin D and zinc are massive when it comes to defending ourselves against viral infection. Okay? So massive, massive, massive. So I'm a fan of liver. And so as part of my 80-10-10, there will be maybe 5% liver and 5% kidney, something like that. Absolutely great. That sounds kind of complicated, but actually, if you just talk to your lovely raw food supplier,
Or even your butcher. You can go and get
Or we're not on the DIY yet. So, so the way to start, just as when you started driving, you have an instructor. Basically, they're your driving instructor. So for the first 6 months, let them do the balancing things together. Okay?
Right.
You just feed variety and off you go. Once you find your feet and you want to go further, you want to actually create some beautiful diets, some beautiful food, which is the most exciting thing possibly in the world, then you can do this thing, where you have 85% of bone and organ and meat, and then you add some of these green veggies, either fermented sauerkraut type fermentation, lactobacillus fermentation, or lightly steamed, because you're breaking them down, because dogs are carnivores and they eat ruminants, for example, and they eat herbivores who have pre-digested all this green material. Hence my fascination with green material in the bowl. Okay. Yeah. So you would also, I love to add NHS, nuts, herbs and seeds. So the nuts soak overnight, remove any anti-nutrients, crush them, put them into the blender with your greens, off you go. Great. Herbs, anything that's in the garden, anything that's you can get from anywhere, nettles in the woods, whatever it might be. You could add those as well for herbs. And seed oils are deathly.
Yeah.
Seeds themselves are
good.
life itself. So pumpkin seed, sunflower seed, all these amazing seeds.
I'm going to come to pumpkin seed.
You can put
later.
them in and it's really, really, really good.
But I'm aware that we've still got the fourth one to go. Then I'm going to come to...
Right. Just, yes.
There's so much I want to ask
Just as well
you.
we're being filmed, because otherwise we would be here for an entire
All
day.
day.
For an entire day. So thank you guys for watching this, because you're constraining our times. So, benefit, bugs, balance. We've done a very shallow dive with those so far, but it's quite an interesting dive. And the last one is bones. People and vets and whoever will say you can't feed bones because you will cause damage. And what they're referring to is they have seen cases where dogs have got a bone stuck in their throat.
That's what
and they have to operate or something like that. But those bones are almost always cooked, because cooked bone is pretty indigestible. Whereas raw bones, which dogs have been eating for millions of years, is digestible. And if your dog ideally has grown up from day one with bones, then they know how to eat bones. I described Jet, and he was taking the chicken wing from here to here. He knows how to eat it, because if you think of it, if bones actually damaged dogs would not have evolved to be present on the planet today.
Okay.
Yeah? Because once you've eaten the meat and the organs from a carcass, what's left? The bones. What are you going to eat as you wait for the next zebra to come along? You're just going to chew on the cartilage and the bones or whatever's left.
I mean, bone meal has been put on the soil for many, many years to enhance the nutrients of the soil. So we know that bones, I'm a huge proponent of bone broth.
I love bone broth for dogs and humans.
But for me, I mean, I don't
Totally.
eat meat, but I have bone broth every week.
Marvellous.
Because it is so important.
Yeah.
So I'm going to ask you, so when I do my bones, so I get my bones, they're dirt cheap from Riverford Farm, 3 carcasses for like £3.30.
3 carcasses of chicken carcass.
Chicken carcasses.
Okay, great.
I can't do red meats, the flavour. I can't have pork cooked in the house. Lamb upsets me because I always used to go lambing when I was a child.
Yeah, I went lambing.
So, for me, that's still trauma held in the body.
Yeah.
But chickens, and I had chickens, but I just didn't like the little fuckers. I mean, I really dislike the chickens.
We've got chickens, and I love them. They're hilarious, and they survive. They're just survivors. But let's not go on a chicken tangent.
I love them now. But when I was a child, they used to peck at me a lot when I went to feed them when I was little, and it used to scare me. But anyway, Bones. So I've cooked my carcasses, or even, when the girls were little and I cook a chicken and we'd eat the meat, and then I would boil the carcass, make the bone broth, take off the chicken, what was left. Because when you take a carcass and you make bone broth, and I make it over a week, 2 week, month period, whatever, it can stay on the hob for 100 years. It's fine.
Yeah.
I then am left with the bones, and I spend forever picking the meat off and making sure that I don't get a tiny bit of bone so that my dogs don't choke on it and die.
Yeah.
However, the bone is so soft by the time I finish cooking it.
Yeah.
Would it hurt?
I think as a general rule, cooked bones shouldn't go in dogs.
Okay.
Don't feed cooked bones. Okay, because otherwise you get into all sorts of nuance and people get the wrong end of the stick and give something cooked that's been on the boil for 2 hours. They give it to the dog, and it has turned from a malleable biological material into reinforced concrete. That's the problem.
Okay.
They harden. If you remember maybe your granny had a joint of beef or lamb with a bone sticking out of it, and it went in, and it was a beautiful whitish bony material, and when it came out, it was rock hard yellow. Brittle material. Okay, so that's what heating does to bones. It turns them into these very brittle, and when they break, they can break into shards, and that's what's going to stick in your throat.
What's going to hurt.
So just for simple messaging, don't feed dogs on any cooked bones.
Okay.
Raw bones. I've actually done a video. I'm going to blatantly push it because it just takes you through this. Okay. So there are two videos on my website. One is raw feeding the basics, and that's just going through the 80%, and then nuts, herbs, and seeds and veggies. That kind of goes through that.
I had never thought about giving the dogs nuts,
herbs, and seeds. And with the seeds, you can sprout them. Super healthy for the dogs. Absolutely go for it.
Super healthy for us.
Totally. You put them in the blender, you make a smoothie, and you add it to this mincy material. So dead easy to do. Yeah.
Okay.
You don't need a degree in nutrition to feed your dog any more than you need a degree in nutrition to feed yourself.
I kind of think you do in this toxic world.
Well, I think you need a degree in toxicology,
yeah,
not necessarily in nutrition.
Yeah.
Okay.
True.
So.
I am going to come back to seeds for a moment. In this jar here,
yeah,
I have my pumpkin seeds.
Yeah.
So at Halloween, I got a couple of really beautiful pumpkins,
yeah,
and I was lucky enough to get organic ones,
yeah,
from Glastonbury, from the St Stephen's Ley line, of course.
Why does that not surprise me? Okay.
A friend of mine got it for me.
Yeah.
So I've dried them,
yeah,
and I blended them.
Yeah.
And this is an
you blitz them. You put them into you
put them in
pulverize them.
Put them in the NutriBullet.
Yeah.
So I use this for worming powder.
Yeah.
Would you use this?
No.
Or would you actually use the seeds?
I would keep the seeds entire until the day or within a couple of days of use. Okay, and then you put them in the NutriBullet, and you just do 2 or 3 days worth, because the oils in the pumpkin seeds will oxidize. This is the seed oil conundrum. In that flora oil, for example, by the time it hits the supermarket shelf, is rancid. And is oxidized and is pro-inflammatory and has been linked to cancer, a direct line to cancer, among other things. That's better, but rather than doing all your pumpkin seeds, the day after Halloween.
Well, they've been dried in the oven first.
Okay, they've been dried in the oven first. Why not keep a big jar of the dried seeds and then just take out what you need for a few days and do them fresh? That's what I'm getting at.
In the same way that you would do flaxseed.
Yes.
Because that goes rancid.
Totally. Yeah. Or your coffee beans.
Okay.
Yeah. You wouldn't grind your coffee and then use them 5 weeks later.
I'm going to be honest. On a time restraint.
Yeah.
I would find that hard to do. And also, I've only got the massive Vitamix.
Yeah.
And so if I put a week's supply in there.
Yeah.
it's not really going to cut the mustard.
Yeah.
In the same way that one pumpkin, a whole pumpkin's worth of seeds, doesn't really blitz that well in the microwave. I don't use a microwave in the bullet.
Yeah.
So I put 2 in, and that is kind of. So what would you say?
Yeah. Here's the way around it: is that when you're making the green smoothie, and you can make it up for 2 or 3 days worth. Yeah. So you only need to do it twice a week. Yeah. You get some greens, and you get some seeds, whole seeds. And you get your greens, you get your nuts, herbs, and seeds, and you can add some marine oil, some wild salmon or wild herring or sardine or something oil to that, and you leave that in the fridge for 2-3 days, and then it's fresh, and then you do another one, and so just twice a week, or you can make that up and freeze it.
Yeah, which is what I do with my greens.
Great. And so if you freeze small quantities, because you're 2 upstairs, they're not Rottweilers, they're not enormous. Bless them. Where were we? Okay, so you're in the right ballpark by feeding the pumpkin. Is there any science to say pumpkin will expel worms? Not really, but we've been doing it for years and years and years and years. I think it's a great thing to do. Yes.
Okay. So then
you've got some Vermex.
Yes, that was the next one I was going to come to. Get that out.
Marvellous. Okay, great. So Vermex, I'm declaring an interest. I've been working with these guys for the last 13 years or so because I think they're the bee's knees. Okay. So
I got that from my local pet shop, but my local pet shop, actually not out here, it was when I lived in London, is an independent, and it is full of colloidal silver and Vermex and canine things. It's they sell the other stuff, but it is incredibly holistic. And you go in there and you sit there with Mandy for a couple of hours and talk through everything. Yeah. Cracking.
Love it. Yeah. Talking food. It's what I do for a living. Yeah. How lucky am I? Yeah, absolutely. So Vermex, what they did is that 15 years or so, Philip Gazala, the boss, recently retired. Hello, Philip. Probably not watching this, but you never know. He wanted to produce a product which helped dogs reduce massively their pharmaceutical consumption for worms. Okay, you're not allowed to call it a wormer because the veterinary medicines directorate, the big, cheese, they say it's not licensed as a wormer because that would cost hundreds of thousands of pounds to get it licensed. But there are herbs within this, and there are no pharmaceuticals in here whatsoever, and it's called a product to promote gut hygiene, intestinal hygiene, which is code for saying it will promote the immunity of the gut and will make the life of any worms or worm eggs in the gut very difficult, such that the dog will be able to clear those worms. And I've used Vermex on many occasions. We use it on ours as well. Whereby dog has a worm burden, and then we use Vermex, and then dog doesn't have a worm burden. Horse has a worm burden, Vermex, no worm burden. Yeah. So you only need to see a few hundred of those before you know.
Am I using this correctly then? Because what I'm doing is just putting a couple of drops in my dog's food once a week.
Okay. What I would suggest you do is you on the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd of every month, you put in a good dose.
Okay.
That's the way to guarantee it.
And the reason you're saying this is because worms and parasites breed on the full moon,
on a regular basis. Yeah, they usually have a 3-week life cycle, and the body, depending, if you read Rudolf Steiner, then the moon has a massive influence on these things. Also on cows when they calve, by the way, but that's another story. And also on women, actually, if you talk to midwives, they'll say, okay, if it's a full moon, anybody who's 5 days before or 5 days after will tend to
gravitate to that.
To gravitate.
Okay, so I buy my meat, as you know, from Riverford.
Yeah.
the carcasses come frozen.
Yep.
They tell you not to refreeze them, but I always do.
Yep.
Because I'm going to cook the hell out of it in a bone broth.
Yep.
And I think this is all kind of quite a lot of bollocks.
Yeah.
But that's because I'm cooking it. But if I'm giving it to my bears, is that okay to give them?
I would. So, what are your options? You defrost and you put.
Yeah.
If you put one carcass down, you'll have fights. Okay, because it's a high value thing. A herbal will come in from here, and Evie will come in from here, and they'll go, "Oh, it's mine. No, it's mine." You know, she'll say, "I'm 13. I'm going to get it," and he'll go, "No, I need it because I'm tiny." You know, and they will fight. Okay, so if you just chop the thing in half,
but I'm more worried about the fact it's been frozen.
it's fine. Freeze. All meat has to go in the freezer. All meat has to go in the freezer for at least 7 days because then it kills the parasites.
Thank you. We hadn't mentioned that.
Okay.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Really, really important. There are all these gems that, you know, if we had long enough, we would go through. But that's why this free-form conversation is so useful.
Yeah. Same way for us. I always freeze bread, even though I have sourdough bread, because it breaks down the sugar.
It does. Yes.
So,
yes.
You know, that makes it much easier to digest, even though it's organic sourdough.
Yeah.
So we have got to freeze the dog.
So this is another. So number one is you never feed cooked bones. That's one of these.
Yeah.
You always feed variety. That's another.
Yeah.
Absolute. And the third one is all meat has to be in the freezer at, you know, standard minus 18 or so, has to be in the freezer for a week before it goes to the dog. Okay.
Wow.
All meat. Okay. That reduces Campylobacter. It eliminates all parasites. If there is a smidge of other bacteria in the meat, that's fine. It will not really have time to proliferate when you thaw. And as I've said before, we see infection from raw food very, very, very rarely. Yeah, remember the Helsinki study, 90,000 dogs, 3 possible.
Gosh.
Yeah. So
the kibble companies don't want you to know that, do
Of course they don't want you to know that.
Nick, we have been going on far longer than my hour.
What is our time so far?
Nick, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
It's an absolute pleasure. I look forward to the quick fire because we might actually get through more than 4 topics in 1 hour. So absolutely keen to do that. Thank you.
We'll see you next week. Now, I'd normally say here, the doctor of your future is you. But remember, you are also the doctor of your dog.